Greetings, my excellent friend.
Welcome to Most Excellent Adventure
to Heavy Metal
History.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the Heavy Metal History Podcast, my guest for today's episode is Hal Microutsicos. Did I do it right?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good.
All right. He is the brains behind the one-man band Engulf, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Hal, thank you for doing the podcast, man.
Anytime, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I've followed you since your last EP came out, and truthfully, kind of forgot about it until I started seeing stuff pop up for this new one, and I was like, oh, fuck, I need to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
So I reached out to you, and now here we are, and we're going to talk about Engulf today.
All right, let's do it.
So the thing I like to start out with before I get to that, though, because it's a little bit of a cliche question, but it plays into everything, I promise. But for you personally, what were those first bands and first records that you remember hearing and buying that kind of got you into heavy metal, that kind of changed your way of thinking about music?
I think heavy metal wise, so growing up, my mom would always play the local classic rock station. So there was a lot of stuff on there that was kind of gateway worthy, at least for young years, as young as mine, 6 or 7. So bands like, they would play Sabbath or Ozzy or Metallica would come on, and I would dig that. So once LimeWire was a thing and I learned about that, I would go and download, whatever songs that I would hear on the radio and dig that. And it was kind of like the same spiel that everyone gives. You hear one heavy thing and then you kind of want the next heaviest, the next most extreme type deal. So that evolved into more the thrash bands of the 80s, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, turns into Sepultura, Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, turns into some of the real obscure Black Death stuff I like to listen to right now. So that's kind of how it started off all for me, at least.
Yeah, it seems like it's a pretty slippery slope for most people. Like once you hear that first band, it's always, man, what's the next thing I can hear?
Yeah.
So what's one record that's kind of stuck with you over the years that you've always been like, okay, this is like my favorite record? I know it's hard because there's so much music, and if you're anything like me, like your taste is always changing and evolving, but
right.
I feel like I always have my go-tos every now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much music out there now. Like you had said, right, when you opened up, you listened to the last Engulf EP, and then you forget about it just because 2 days later something else catches your ear, and it's just this constant, fire hydrant of really, really good new extreme music that comes out. But for me, like back when I first started, getting into more extreme stuff and finding records that really caught my ear, I just remember going on LimeWire, and I think all I searched was death metal because I heard like 1 or 2 songs I liked. I was like, all right, let me see what else pops up. And Legion of Veracity by Suffocation came up there. And just everything about that song was perfect to me. I was like, okay, this is it. Like, this is what death metal is. This is what I want to try and write and play. And I never actually bought the record. I only own it on tape, which is an original print. But it's been the one that I constantly come back to as my favorite Suffocation record, definitely my favorite of those old school death metal records. Terrence Hobbs' guitar lead work, even though I'm a rhythm player, is always just dazzling to watch. I've briefly met him at Maryland Death Fest. He's a cool guy, and they always kill it live. So I definitely got to say, probably Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation was that one that still holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah, and I there's no other death metal vocalist to me besides like maybe Corpse Grinder that is as powerful as Frank Mullen. I mean, you hear his voice immediately, you know it's him. Yeah,
absolutely. And especially for the time in when that came out in I think 90 or 91.
Yeah.
That was some of the lowest, most guttural stuff you heard. I mean, you had some of the higher, raspier stuff like Dave Vincent from Morbid Angel. Some of the UK, the British bands, Carl Willis was going pretty low, but when Frank dropped whatever he did on Effigy, that was like everyone who's now in a brutal death band, immediately had a boner, and they were like, "Nope, we got to go low. That's what we got to do." And yeah, definitely agree with you. I'm glad I caught him on his farewell tour to see them live.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw them, man. It was with when Carcass was doing like their return tour or whatever, like years ago, probably like 2008 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Suffocation was like co-headlining. I was just stoked to see Carcass, but the problem was I had never seen Suffocation, and they came on and were so disgustingly heavy that I was like, I don't know if like Carcass is going to be able to beat that. And sure enough, like it was just so heavy that for me they stole the show. Not that Carcass wasn't absolutely amazing,
right?
But I was just like, damn it.
Yeah, when there's a band like Suffa that comes out, and despite them having they're nowhere near their original lineup, it's just Terrence is the only original member. And I guess you can kind of say Derek Boyer's been around for a while, but whoever they've got in the band it's still, the couple times I've seen them, they're always super, super tight and just lethal live.
Yeah, when I saw them, and actually I had done some touring on my own after that. They had Guy Marche in the band, and that dude's a killer guitar player for sure. Yeah,
him and Terrence, that was a hell of a duo right there live, and especially how they would trade off solos and stuff. It was really cool.
Yeah. So, getting into extreme music like that, and I guess were your parents like okay with it? Because I know a lot of people's parents seem to either make them shy away from it, or like they kind of embrace it, like whatever, that they're gonna do their own thing. Like, did you ever have any pushback about listening to more extreme music?
No, not really. My folks were pretty chill with it. They didn't really care, because I wasn't doing anything bad. Growing up, a kid in middle school, high school, listening to Slayer and Suffocation and all that stuff. It's like I got all straight A's. I was well behaved. I was playing soccer. I was in the marching band. I'm just kind of like just a good kid. So they didn't really care. I didn't have anything totally disgustingly profane on my T-shirts, and I kept myself out of trouble. So they were like, as long as you keep your grades up and out of trouble, you can do what you want. So that was kind of their thought of it, and they were super supportive because my brother was my younger brother was a drummer, and I had my guitar. So we had a little a death metal band in high school, and nice. So we would play upstairs and bang away on the drums and have the guitars all cranked all out, and they didn't care. They were pretty stoked about it too. They came out to a couple shows and stuff, so it was fun. It was definitely a healthy, supportive environment, and I can't thank them enough for that.
Yeah, that's got to be good to have, because I mean, it kind of makes it easier when you're trying to like make this piece of art with music, and you're not having everybody kind of like dissuade you from it. I think support is paramount with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, how did that transition to you playing guitar?
So I had played in middle school. I picked up trumpet. So I was in middle school band, and I played for a couple of I played all the way through graduation. So I played it for 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
And I bought a guitar just because I thought it would be cool and something new to try. And at that point I was really getting into more extreme stuff. And I was like, man, it'd be really cool to start a death metal band. And my brother wanted to get a drum kit. My buddy wanted to get a bass. I was like, all right, I'll get a guitar. And just bought a cheap guitar with like some summer money I had saved up. Mm-hmm. And I went out and picked it up, and as funny as it is when I tell people this, I had no formal guitar music training. My music training was Guitar Hero. Like, as funny as that is, like I'm telling you, as funny as it is, I got really, really good at Guitar Hero. I could play like all the songs on the hardest level, and I knew the songs, I knew how they were structured, and it kind of gave me just a basic idea of the coordination you need with your fingers to play. Mm-hmm. And then I just kind of, when I got my guitar, once I figured out what notes make what sound, and I knew how to read tabs, which was easy, I just picked easy songs like For Whom the Bell Tolls, Metallica. Let me learn how to play that. Then, once I learn how to play that, I'll learn the next hardest song and just kind of go from there. And then, once you learn enough songs and play enough different styles, or at least learn it by ear, you get good at learning it by ear, and you kind of learn how to write what is coming up and fermenting in your brain that you want to try and write, and express. So that's kind of how I got into guitar.
So you've been entirely like just self-taught through the virtue of just tabs and stuff like that?
Yep, guitar.
Damn.
Guitar was all self-taught. The formal music training that I did have when I was in like concert band, jazz band, and stuff definitely gave me the basics of just music, theory, chords, what sounds good, what doesn't, staying on tempo changes, things of that nature. Different notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, what they are, different patterns, all that stuff. And that along with the tabs really helped out. So it wasn't like a bass nothing. Like I didn't even know how to read music. Like I knew how to read sheet music, not guitar, but the brass music. But yeah, that's kind of how that came about. So
I guess it makes a lot of sense, man, because in Engulf, you play everything, correct? Like you write all the music for the guitar and drums and everything.
Yep, I play the guitar. I'm doing air quotes right now, but you can't see it. I play the bass. Yeah. And I write. I program. The drums are programmed. So I do write all the parts and then perform the vocals. So,
see, that is one of my favorite things about knowing it's one guy kind of behind everything. Is it in one sense it makes a lot of musicians look bad because you're doing this all by yourself. You have that thing in your brain that says, hey, I know how to write this, I know how to make this go together with this, and when it sounds as good as this does, as far as like from a writing perspective and even like the recording perspective, it's like, man, why does a band need 6 people or 7 people or whatever when this one dude can do it all by himself? And I think it speaks a lot to like your natural talent as a musician. And now hearing that it stems from just being in band and playing trumpet and going all to this project, that's awesome to hear about.
Yeah, thank you, man. That's very kind of you. I'm definitely not the first guy to do it. I don't know if you're familiar with guys like Peter from Blood Soaked or Sean Whitaker from And Just Decrepity, like all those guys. And I booked a show back when I was in high school, and Peter came up and played, and he's a really cool guy. But it was just him on stage. He had an iPod for his drums hooked up to a PA, and then just playing through his guitar amp and doing the vocals.
Nice.
Now that's not something I don't ever really foresee myself doing with Engulf.
Yeah.
I think if I wanted to take it live, I would try and I would definitely make it a point to get a good backing band, guest musicians to help give a full live performance. But I think the shows that really impress me the most are the ones like the 3-pieces, like a really, really tight 3-piece, like Dying Fetus live, bands like that. So you really don't need it, depending on the style of music. If there's a lot of melodies and a lot of lead parts and rhythm parts and differing guitar parts, it makes sense to have 2 guitarists. And bass and drums are almost paramount. You have to have them. But when there's 3 guitars, 2 vocalists, sometimes I just think it's a little bit overkill, and it doesn't even really translate that well live. It just sounds like a mess.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. The 3 guitars especially, like it just sounds muddy as shit.
Yeah, and especially if the sound's not that great in the venue and not everyone's just locked in super tight together, you're kind of defeating the purpose of having all 3.
Yeah, I think too with the advent of technology, man, there's a lot more guys out there that are like kind of taking it under their control to do everything on their own, whether it's by necessity or on purpose. And I'm just kind of in awe of the talent that a lot of these guys have to where they can just do everything on their own like that and make it sound like a whole real band as they're playing everything.
Yeah, that's a big prop to the state of the technology that we have now. Like Superior Drummer, that's what I use for Engulf's drum programming. I use Superior 3. It's a phenomenal program that sounds very, very real. Mm-hmm. A lot of the guitar reamps that you see, I use just a free Mercurial guitar plugin for my demos, and that even sounds, I've listened to it, I'm like, this isn't really that bad. I could really just put this up and it would sound really, really good, and it's just a flat mix. So when you take that and then the endless amount of different types of guitar tones and bass tones and vocal sounds that you can get with digital mastering and the digital technology out there, the possibilities are really endless, and it makes it possible for guys like me and a lot of other solo artists to make music by themselves in their bedroom, and make it sound really, really good. And it also helps to have a good producer. I don't produce at all. My Chris Kelly from Illustrium and Galactic Empire, he's my producer. I've been working with him for all 3 EPs, and he does a phenomenal job. So it kind of lets me focus on performance and just nailing the parts, and he kind of takes it and works his magic and makes it sound like it does. So
yeah, so you definitely like put a lot of work and thought into it. Like, it's not just a hobby for you. This is something like you really want to do and are passionate about, but it just so happens it's you that's writing everything.
Yeah, so the lyrical concept is they're all tied together. It's kind of one big story. I'd like to one of these days re-release the EPs kind of like packaged with some liner notes explaining the story. It's just a fictional sci-fi story that I came up with, but I really wanted to do it for a long time, and I wanted to do it right. And when I say right, I mean have a good quality production, make sure the music is good, have the right artist behind it, handle the artwork, work with the same guys, and kind of just build this little, trilogy that I've done, all leading up to whatever may come in the coming years in the future.
Yeah.
And I mean, the first EP I released in September 2017.
Yeah,
those songs had been written since, I don't know, early 2015, and I wrote them and sat on them and tweaked them and refined them and got them to where I was happy with them, and put a lot of thought and detail into a lot of minute things like drum fills and bass parts and guitar harmonies and things, and just patternings that makes sense, so it sounds like one cohesive piece and not just kind of a jumbled mess of riffs and blast beats. So.
And then is that how you work for every EP so far, or have you like kind of switched things up over each one?
In terms of musical styles, or
or just even writing? Writing.
I try not to put too much brain power into the or overthink the like what the music actually sounds like. I always thought that when I would try and force myself to write music, it doesn't sound good. So everything you hear is stuff that I was just kind of jamming along, playing guitar, and something caught my ear, and I kind of worked on it and built songs around it. So it's just kind of naturally whatever I was feeling. Stylistically, that's just kind of how it comes out. That's just kind of been the evolution of it. I have a general idea of the sound I'd like to go for. But I try not to pigeonhole myself to where, I can't play that note. That doesn't sound like it would be in a brutal death song or, whatever, anything like that. I just kind of let it flow and evolve as it has. And I think that when bands do that, you can really tell that they don't force it. They're just playing whatever they want to play. Bands like Cannibal Corpse, or I'd even make a comparison to like Carnifex that do, they put out a good amount of material. They have a pretty extensive back catalog, but there's not a lot of variety. There's enough in there to show that they're kind of trying new things here and there, but overall it's a cohesive, you hear Carnifex, it's Carnifex. You hear Cannibal Corpse, it's Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah.
Bands like the one I make comparisons to are kind of like Whitechapel or Suicide Silence, bands that originally had a sound when they were younger, but years on the road and years of practice and playing, they kind of just like, hey, this is what we want to play. We're not going to, put ourselves in a corner of, we can only play this style of deathcore from 2008 or 9. We want to just play whatever we want to play, and this is what comes out. And if you like it, you like it. And you don't, you don't. And that's, I think, why they've seen success.
Yeah, and I think that's I think a lot of bands need to take that into account, because there are some that they're okay with just kind of being in the status quo of things and maybe not necessarily putting out the same record over and over, but they're not taking any chances either.
Yeah.
And a lot more bands need to do that, even if it's bad. Like, why not at least take the chance that you did something different?
Yeah, and I think it helps. It helps you stand out too, because if you put yourself into a corner, if you go on Facebook and your genre is death metal, that could really be anything. I mean, death metal has so many different subgenres, and a lot of different other genres have crossed over and bled into it. If your genre for your band on your page is UK 1991 death metal worship, and that's all you're really expected to play or you're gonna play, I mean, it's gonna get old, or there's a lot of different bands out there that got hooked onto the HM2 sound, and as much as I love it, there's a lot of really, really good ones out there, like Wretched Fate. There's all kinds of really great bands that are doing it really well, and not putting themselves into a corner where they can't get out and they're kind of stuck, like, oh, this is I guess we have to play this now. But it's easy to get lost, especially with how many bands there are and the amount of good music that's coming out. You've really got to try and make yourself stand out to be remembered, or just be relentless on social media, or both.
Yeah, social media is a big one, man. That's a whole nother game in itself. But I think the one thing I've been noticing as a trend the past couple of years is that kind of like really cavernous old school death metal sound. I mean, there's so many bands that are just trying to sound like that now, and there's some good ones, don't get me wrong, but then there's other ones that just pop up, and it's like, well, fuck, man, you just sound like so and so band. Not to put anybody on the spot, I don't want to do that. But it's like you can tell that's like the thing everybody's trying to play right now, is that style of death metal, for the most part. Not anyone specific here. I'm not gonna, like I said, call anybody out, but it's something I've kind of noticed.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. There was that kind of style of, I guess, incantation type worship death metal was pretty popular. That came after that first initial big wave of guys using the HM2 pedal, playing the kind of the entombed sound. But like you said, there's a lot of really good ones out there. There's ones that are that will catch your ear, and those are the ones that you remember. And the bands such as even though I wasn't the biggest fan of their new record, Tomb Mold, just their frequency of releases. I thought Manner of Infinite Forms was, phenomenal. I loved that as soon as I heard it, and it caught my ear. It caught me. There was catchiness in it, and memorability is a big thing that gets lost with some styles of death metal. I find, especially with slam bands, brutal death metal bands. A lot of, and even kind of on a flip side, like the Death Doom stuff, a lot of the riffs and chord progressions that are used, slam and brutal death being a lot more chromatic. There's not a lot of room for memorability, and if you're playing something that should be memorable, it's probably not, because it's probably already been done. I don't know if you kind of get where I'm going with that, but if you meld different styles and allow yourself that freedom to kind of flow in and out of subgenres within a song, you lend yourself the ability to have that memorability within the songs, and that's what's important. You've got to be remembered.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm with you on the Tomb Mold thing. The one thing that's really caught me about them is, like, I think a lot of their riffs that they play are very blues sounding, but it's just so down tuned and like heavy metal that it doesn't make it sound like a blues song. It sounds like a death metal song. Yeah,
they've definitely got a unique style. It's kind of hard to pinpoint which exact style of death metal they were trying to replicate, but they've I've seen them live, I think twice, and they've been great both times, and I love watching the guitar work. And their drummer in particular was one of the kind of things that cemented my original opinion of you've got to have a tight live band and everyone's got to be locked in. Their drummer also does their vocals live, and he's a machine. And having I try to do it within Engulf, within the programming, but have drum fills that are just changed up, not just a 16th note roll from the top tom to the floor tom and then a crash cymbal at the end. Throw in some different things. Ben from Aborted is one of my favorites in terms of style. The drummer from Insect Warfare, who's now in Necrofire and Malignant Altar. I love his drumming style. He's got a very loose, fluid, almost kind of bluesy drumming style, and it keeps things very interesting. And I think that's really important. But even to Tomb Mold, the guitar riffs are just very angular. They change. They're kind of coming out of nowhere, and that's, I think, why they got really popular, as well as the frequency of releases they put out. Between the 3 full lengths they have, they put out tour tapes. They're on the road a lot, and they're doing it how you should do if you want to expect to do, be remembered, as an extreme metal band. Now there's so many. You've got to be on the road. You've got to be in people's faces at all times. So.
Yeah, that's true. I was very surprised to find out they were putting out an album this year when they just released one last year. I was like, what are you guys going for, like the Black Sabbath level of releases here? We're going to put out one every single year.
Yeah, but if you think about it too, like Black Dahlia Murder is on like an almost every 2.5 year
that's true
release cycle, and they're constantly on the road in between. So
yeah, that's it. I always like kind of wonder, because the term like album cycle comes up a lot, and I think there are bands that do strictly follow that. But I mean, if it works for them and that's how they work the best, then I don't see a problem with it. But I think it's some of the fans' expectations sometimes when something takes a little longer than what they're used to. That it's like, well, just give them time. Like maybe they're working a little harder on it this time because they want to do something different. And I don't think bands should be beholden to like that whole cycle thing.
No, and I'm not in the big biz or working with the big label, so I'm not contracted for anything. I have a feeling that some of that may be contractual, to where a band will sign something and say, all right, we're going to be signed to X label for 4 years and do 2 albums and hit 3 tours, and it just so happens that they space it out, to where they release one initially and then another one 2 years later, and then kind of wrap it up at the end of a touring cycle.
Yep.
I think that might have something to do with it. But if you look at a band like Dying Fetus, they have longer gaps in between their records, and they're one of the bands that I think ever since 2000, like everything they've released from War of Attrition on, I mean, all their old records are great, and actually going back to even their first records, they just get better and better and better and better, I think. Yeah. Production-wise, musically, they're super catchy, and you can tell there's a lot of thought and detail put into everything, the riffs, the vocals, the drum parts. And I saw that on one of their studio reports. The detail that kind of went in nitpicking they did in studio. It pays off when you give yourself the time, if you have it.
I agree. Yes. Because like if you have to rush something out, like maybe sometimes it's really apparent, or maybe sometimes it's not, depending on the listener. But I think you can really tell with the records that have been rushed in terms of like the pantheon of heavy metal releases, and even some of those bands will talk about that when they've been like, oh yeah, we got rushed on this one. It's whatever. We don't talk about it.
Yeah. It also it helps having a consistent lineup, because you learn each other's styles, writing styles, playing, recording styles. If a band loses a drummer and they have to get someone in real quick and record something, that you can kind of tell when some of that stuff happens. But yeah.
So then, as far as you personally, with your own writing and working kind of style, maybe with this EP specifically, since I do want to talk to you about this, like, where does it start for you with a writing process?
Generally, just a good riff. Like I was saying earlier, I'll kind of just play guitar, and whether I'll be listening to something else or just playing on my own, just fiddling around, I'll play something or have kind of a sound in my head, and I want to try and get it out. And then once that good riff is there, whether it's a main riff or a chorus riff or whatever part of the song it's going to be, I kind of build it around that and not cram it together with other stuff I just have laying around unless it fits.
Yeah.
So I kind of get a song structurally together with just the guitar parts, and I say, okay, this is how I think it's going to kind of go. And then I'll program it with my drum program here and get that riff down with the drums and just kind of sit on that for a while.
Okay.
And then as I sit on that, I'll refine the drum parts, also add in guitar harmonies. Things change, or I'll listen to it for a while. I'm like, I don't really like that, or I'll sit on it. I'm like, yeah, that's it. And then once the song's structurally together with kind of both guitar parts, the harmonies and melodies and things, and then the drums with the full fleshed out little details like which cymbal I'm on and fills and things. I'll kind of double back and do vocals, so put lyrics to it if I have it already. And I try and line it up to where the vocals act as a percussive element, and they kind of go along with what the guitars and drums are doing, and they don't stand out too far.
Okay.
So it kind of stays with the music and accents what's already there. And then the very last thing is bass. It mostly just follows the rhythm guitar part, more or less. So
yeah, bass is always a weird thing. Like if you can have one of those fantastic bass players, that just knows how to do all those little crazy tricks with a bass, or I don't know what the word is, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely adds a whole layer. But outside of that, like the low end is really all people are gonna hear anyways with it.
Right. And so the first two releases I did, I didn't even have a bass. I didn't own one. I used Chris's at his place. I kind of just winged the bass parts. If you listen really close, you can kind of tell it at some spots. But for this one, I bought a bass a couple months before, and it was a 6-string bass.
Oh,
do I need
wow.
Do I need 6 strings for a bass? Absolutely not. I do not. But
sounds good as shit.
But there were some parts that I thought, if I had the full range here with the 6 strings, I could kind of match what the guitar is doing in some of the more atmospheric parts.
Yeah.
And hit some different kind of octaves and chords and things. And kind of playing with it, I was like, oh, that was a good decision. So this one had a little bit more thought put into the bass, and I'm going to continue doing that moving forward. So hopefully it shines through. But yeah, sometimes I'm not. Like I said, I'm not a bassist. I'm not a super technical guitar player at all, so I'm definitely not a technical bass player. And I kind of just use it to just carry the low end, go with the drums, and just like it's kind of the same thing with the vocals, just accent what's already there and just kind of focus on the riff.
It's funny you say you're not a technical guitar player, but I feel like you're underselling yourself a little bit, because there's some parts, man, like especially on the last EP where I'm listening to the riff and I'll just hear how you'll slide in these pinch harmonics at just like these crazy spots, and I'm like, fuck, how does he do that, man? It sounds sick. I like I'm a sucker for a pinch harmonic, so
yeah,
the way those are in there, man, I fucking love it.
Cool, man. I'm glad you dig it. That's awesome.
So when did you decide to start writing stuff for this EP? Because I mean, it's only been a year since the last one, right? I assume it was probably not long after.
Yeah. So let's see. The latter 3 songs on the album, I actually had kind of come together sometime mid 2016, late 2016, something like that. So they were kind of those 3 songs were kind of already written and planned out by the time the second EP was coming together. So I kind of had like 7 or 8 songs done, and I'm just kind of wanted to, I used the lyrical content that ended up going with the songs to kind of divide them up between the EPs.
Okay.
The first track, the one that's released, Bane of Fire, is the newest of all the ones that's been released, and I think I did write that one sometime starting after the second EP, so late last year, late last year. I felt like I wanted another song. I had kind of all the riffs that are in there ready. I just needed to put it together structurally, and it tied together with the other ones well. So that's when that one was written. But yeah, most of the other ones are kind of oldish.
I think, I actually wanted to touch on this earlier because you were mentioning not like picking apart a song too much. And I've talked to a lot of people, and that is the one thing I hear consistently is how much they pick apart stuff too much. And it's interesting to hear somebody talk about the opposite way, where you kind of just let it be and not like overthink it. And when a riff comes, and then that's kind of how you put stuff together.
Right. So it kind of goes like, there's two sides of it. There's the one side where you need to put enough thought into it and let it fester for long enough to where you're almost sick of the song when you're done with it and you recorded it, but in a good way, to where you had enough time to put in detail into the drums, detail into the riffs, the structure of the song, how it sounds to other people. That's the one side of it that I try and stay on. The other side is you're constantly changing everything. You're never happy. You're doing changes last minute in the studio that aren't benefiting you.
Yeah.
Cases of severe overproduction. I think when you have kind of someone almost like in a controlling manner, very closed-minded, they have a specific sound in their head, but they don't know what that actually sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah,
but,
you are.
Yeah, so like you'll hear something and you're like, man, this sounds like really odd. I don't know why. Like I've heard songs like that with certain productions. I'm not going to call names or anything like that, but I'm just like, that sounds like way too forced. And if you listen to interviews with individuals in that group or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, I can kind of see where they just kind of tried to nitpick it apart and they just couldn't keep it together type thing. So there's overthinking that needs to be done, but there's also overthinking that doesn't need to be done.
Yeah, I was reading up on a bunch of Napalm Death stuff because outside of like these interview episodes, I kind of talk about records from the past, and I forget the name of it. Fear, Emptiness, Despair, I think, the one that came out in '94. They were talking about how one of the songs on it they don't even remember writing, and then when they get asked about it, they're like, "Did we even play that song? Like, why did we write that song?" And they forgot all about it.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Shows you the different levels of thought that gets put into stuff.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, so you got your songs written. How many songs are going to be on this, by the way?
So this one's going to be 4 songs. Four brand
songs.
new. Yep, 4
Cool.
brand new originals.
So when you have all that written and ready to go, how do you start the recording process? I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier about like programming drums and kind of writing a riff at a time. Is it a piece at a time, or do you do a song at a time?
So where I've been recording these in proximity to my house, it's about a hour and 45 minute, 2-hour drive.
Okay.
So I'll try to plan it to where I bang it out, at least the ones I've done, in 2 weekends. So the first EP, I did one song one day, another song the next day, and then I was done. The second EP, I think I did like a 2.5 day weekend and then another day, which is I think what I did this time. I think I did a 2.5 day weekend and then another day and a half or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What I'll do is I'll send the MIDI map for the drums to Chris, and then he'll kind of take it and import it into Superior, get a basic mix of it, just get it all lined up rhythmically, and then we'll go in and lay down the guitar tracks and just focus on that mainly. And then every day that I'm there, do a little bit of vocals. So like day one will be get 2 drum tracks totally done, 1.5 guitar tracks or 2 guitar tracks, and then the vocals for 1 song. And then the next day, kind of just repeat that until I'm done. It saves my voice from trying to do vocals all in one day.
Yeah.
It gives my brain something else to think about besides just trying to hammer out guitar parts, because by the end of it, with how many times you have to kind of repeat things if you fat finger something or just to get a good take, your brain's totally toast by the end of at least mine is, even at the end of these 4 songs. The last one was the hardest and hardest to do. But yeah, so generally send out the MIDI tracks to Chris. He starts with that. Then we'll do guitar, vocals, kind of in parallel as we go, bass at the end, and then we'll reamp the guitars kind of little by little as we go until we find a tone we want, and then do all those. And then he does the final mix, and that's pretty much it.
So is there any point in time where you're doing this, and you kind of mentioned a little bit about being like burnt out, but is there something so tedious in that process where you're like, man, I hate this part of it. I don't want to do it, but I know I got to do it. That you're just kind of dreading every time you've done this?
Overall recording process, no. I actually really like it. It helps that Chris and I get along really well. It's always a good time hanging out and recording.
Yeah.
He digs the tunes. I dig his production style. And he kind of pushes me to get every last little bit out of each riff and play it as tightly, as cleanly as I can, and I appreciate that. And there's nothing really that I dread of any of this at all. It usually comes together so smoothly and effortlessly. I don't really have to think much about it. I just have to make sure I practice well ahead of time to where when I come in, I'm not wasting my time. I'm not wasting his time by sucking and having to do a gajillion takes. Yeah. I try to one-take stuff as much as I can. Doesn't usually always work out like that. But yeah, no, the whole thing's, other than just kind of the like sigh of relief of at the end, and just kind of being being tired at the end, is mentally kind of drained. Yeah. That's the only thing. But that's not even that bad. With how everything's been coming out, I've been really happy with it.
That's awesome. So, I mean, it's good to hear that, like, it's not a huge burden, because I know that, like, especially with all the work that you put into it, man, it's got to get a little just like overwhelming sometimes, maybe, or you just always like, man, this is fun no matter what you're doing in the process of it.
The only thing is it's a bit, I guess, in the writing process, it can get a bit frustrating if I get to a part where I know the potential for it is there. I know what I need to do, but it just takes a lot of tweaking. The drums sometimes are a little, like, I try to keep things fresh and different and not put in the same fills all the time. So thinking of new stuff there is sometimes a little difficult, but it's nice being able to listen to bands that have really, really good drummers and give me a lot of ideas in terms of different styles to implement and different little tricks to do. Sometimes that's a bit tiring and definitely time consuming, but it's still not that bad. I still have a good time doing it.
Yeah, and at least you put the foresight and thought into not making the drums always sound the same, because that goes a lot longer of a way than just making it sound the same all the time.
Right. Yep.
So as far as your guitar, are you like a big gear guy, or do you just kind of stick with one or two guitars that you have and that's what you work with?
I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4 guitars. One of them is not even really usable. It's just kind of a body that I need to refurb. Mm-hmm. For Engulf, I've only recorded with 2 different guitars. Nice. The same guitar on the first 2, and then I got a newer one for this guitar, or for this release. But I'm not a super big gear guy. I don't have a gigantic pedal board. Mm-hmm. My rig is very basic. Just the guitar through an overdrive pedal. I use an Ibanez Tube Screamer, and then straight into a PV 6505 Plus into a Vader 4x12 cabinet. So it's just nice. It's a bare bones rig. That's what I use live for my other band. And in terms of gear in the studio, for this one we did a mix of a reamp from the PV head that I have and a digital tone. And I believe the digital tone was one of, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was one of Brody Utley's from Rivers of Nile. I think he has a digital tone package out there of either plugins or...
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I think it was one of his that we used, that Chris had on hand, and we blended the two, and we didn't really know how it was going to sound, but we were really happy with how it came out, and we decided to run with it. So, and then the drum programming that I use at home is Easy Drummer 2, just for the scratch tracks, and then he'll import the MIDI and use Superior Drummer 3. I know I've gotten that question before as to what drum program I use, but it's Superior Drummer 3.
Okay. Man, it feels like there's so many nuts and bolts than people realize that go into like doing this all on your own. And I mean, just the programs, making sure so the guitar thing that you mentioned, that's one thing that I've been like kind of noticing a lot more too, is like there's these programs out there. I'm kind of ignorant to it, but it captures like certain guitar players like style and tone, and I'm like, how the fuck did they do that?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm about the same. How the fuck do they do that? Like, I don't really know. I don't really know. It's just there. It's technology that's available. It's cool. It allows you to kind of just add more tools to the toolbox, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Which I feel like if everything was all analog still, you'd have to be in the studio going through like a million pedals and amps and being like, well, let's put these two together and see what happens, and take up way more time.
Yep, for sure.
So you mentioned earlier, and I also know this, that it's all concept albums. So where is the concept kind of going as far as this EP from the previous two, as far as story-wise?
So this one kind of...
How much you want to divulge anyways?
Yeah, no. So this one, the whole thing of it is there's this sentient being that bestows this vision into the human protagonist that's been on all three of the album covers. Mm-hmm. And it kind of sends him into this outer body experience to go kind of through space and time and witness these otherworldly beings that are going to be sent to the Earth to terraform it for the overlord, like sentient being. So this sentient being, I call it Corpheus. This was a concept that my younger brother and friend in high school came up with.
Oh, nice.
And they kind of came up with it and never did anything with it, so I just took it and ran with it. So Corpheus sends these. He's going to send these like three. I'm doing air quotes again, like generals to the Earth to terraform it into like another kingdom for Corpheus. So he bestows his vision into the human protagonist, and then kind of sends him on this out of body journey to see who's going to be coming to Earth, and kind of let him foresee what's coming, but no one else. So this EP has the human in another realm, still witnessing what's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but witnessing another one of the generals per se. So,
damn. Okay. So are you a big sci-fi, like comic book kind of guy personally?
Yeah, I don't read a lot of comic books, but I always loved, the stories behind them. The ones I do read, I always get way into and nerd out on. I like sci-fi movies. I like fantasy stuff, kind of just anything in general that's, fictional, just because it allows you to kind of picture something in your head that's not of this world and let your mind kind of drift and release and kind of just, escape the daily grind, I guess, or the daily realities. And I don't know, it's just kind of neat. I just always thought it was kind of cool. Gore was never a big thing for me in terms of like lyrically. Mm-hmm. Anti-religion. I kind of just stray away from religion or anti-religion in general. I'm just kind of neutral. It doesn't, lyrical topics in that vein don't interest me. So, but the sci-fi stuff, there's an endless amount of sci-fi stories you could write up. You could base it off of something that exists. You could come up with something totally new, like we did. So that's kind of why I like to focus on that.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's great about metal is all of those things correlate and have a place in the genre. You can't really say that about a pop song or an indie song or whatever, or rap. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I love a lot is when somebody can take a story like that and interweave it with music, and it elevates everything else involved with it. On one hand you have the story, and then you have the music that is also a part of it, enhancing that, and it's such a cool thing that the genre is able to do. Right.
Yeah. I mean, even back to like the old Maiden albums that were some more conceptual things, and probably one of my other favorite albums of all time was Crack the Sky by Mastodon. The story arc they had there was just mind blowing, and the music that was behind it was just so powerful to me at the time, and still is. That one was a big influence for me. So anything with like an original conceptual story is always really cool. Nile, I always got way into Nile and their themes and their stories and things. So even though some of theirs are more historical, but still.
Yeah, I've been waiting. I was like, man, is Nile ever going to run out of Egyptian mythology? And I was like, No,
Nope.
probably not.
Nope.
There's thousands of years of it.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, one last thing here that I kind of want to touch on is the album art. You know, you mentioned you've been working with the same guy every cover. How do you let him run with like a concept, or do you guys kind of collaborate on what you want to achieve with the covers?
So for the first EP was my first time working with him. Chris Kiesling from Misanthropic Art, really great guy, and I actually had a doodle like on paper, and I scanned it and sent it to him, and I was like, hey, this is kind of what I'm going for. And then he kind of was like, yeah, I was gonna try and come up with something, but I kind of liked your idea, so I just ran with it, and he just made it look exactly what I wanted.
Damn.
And then the second one and third one, I gave him a basic kind of concept of what I was going for, and then he would draft some sketches, and we'd kind of say, all right, which one do we want to go with, 1, 2, or 3? And I'll say, I like number 2. What do you think? He's like, yeah, number 1 or 2. So I was like, all right, let's go with 2, that type deal. So I gave him a little bit more freedom on the newer ones, but still the general theme and concept I would kind of provide. And then he just kind of brought it all to life. And then once the basic sketch was there, he would put in more detail. I would kind of provide him like a general color theme that I was kind of going for. And then he would draft it up, and then we'd just play with logo placement and coloring and things. The logo was done by Steve Crow from Condemned. I don't think I don't think he's doing logos anymore under his brand, but it was Malevolent Icons at the time. And so yeah, we just try and make everything look good and fit well. And I don't know, I've really enjoyed working with him. So
yeah, I think it fits not only like the style of music, but you know, when you think about the lyrical content, it fits really well with everything. And I think that's another thing that's important, you know, when making the music, is having everything so cohesive like that for the end product.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the thing you were asking, or you know, the topic we were talking about earlier with putting time, thought into making a cohesive end product. That I didn't want to work with, like I don't think I'd ever have for one of my releases just my logo in flat black on the front.
Yeah.
I like having that. You know, death metal's hard enough to kind of comprehend and understand at times. You want to be able to have a visual to go with it, and when you see a cover like the ones Chris has done for me, or any other concept record you see, if there's a grabbing visual for it, and you're kind of looking at it while you're listening to the music, you can kind of picture what I'm trying to go for with lyrically. So yeah. I think that the fact that's why I've gone back and worked with him for each one, because we work well together. He gets the vision across that I'm thinking of, plus more, and it's a good working relationship. So for all 3 releases, I've had the same artist, same logo, same producer, just because I think like it's working, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it type deal.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like too, you know, with whatever you end up doing in the future, it's only going to progress to a better thing by keeping it consistent too, in a way. Yeah,
that's kind of the goal. I don't want to put out something that I don't think topped the last one, and if I ever get to that point, that's when I'll stop and wait until I feel like I've done something more. I don't want to put out plain Jane music. There's enough of that. I'd rather put out stuff that people dig and hold on to and go back and listen to. And the fact that people are, even now still, I guess before I announced this third one, still listening to stuff and still sending me little messages saying they're spinning the first EP or second EP. It's pretty cool. So
yeah, when I heard that new track, I was like, fuck, how did he like manage to I mean, not this is gonna sound like worse than I'm gonna make it out to be, but like I was like, damn, how the fuck did he manage to like make something better than the thing before it? Not that you're like untalented or anything like that. I was just like, I didn't expect it. I was just like, fuck.
Yeah.
That first song is it goes pretty hard.
Thanks, man. Cool. Yeah, totally. That's a common interest of mine as well. I always loved. I don't as much as I do anymore buy CDs, just due to digital media, and I would prefer tape or vinyl. But growing up in high school, I always used to buy whatever CD I would get, the deluxe version that came with a DVD of studio footage.
Oh yeah.
So like I got real familiar with like some of my favorite ones were like Cannibal Corpse, like Visceration Plague. They did like an in studio making of. Nile has done them. I've seen some for Hate Eternal. All these awesome bands, and I love seeing the guys work on their stuff in the studio because you can kind of take that and that's how they do that.
Yes.
Let me try that in the studio, right? That type of thing. So it's a common interest of mine as well.
Cool, perfect. So yeah, I mean, so I guess wrapping up here, when it releases, where can people find it, all that kind of stuff, just so the listeners know where to. And then obviously I'll link to everything when I post this up.
Yeah, link everything. So when I tell them and it's wrong, you can, they'll have the right links.
Yeah.
So it'll be released through Everlasting Spew Records out of Italy on, I believe it's September 20th. We're going to do slipcase CDs like we did for the last one.
Nice.
It'll be available digitally through all streaming platforms and such. You can find it at their Bandcamp. You can find it, like I said, through like Spotify and iTunes once it drops and stuff. And then we're going to premiere one more track in a couple weeks.
Cool.
Not sure through who yet, but it'll be out prior to the release. And then the full EP will be on the 20th of September with the last 2 songs. So
Awesome. Well, Hal, man, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, man. I was really glad that you said yes, because I wanted to talk to you about everything involving the project.
Yeah, man, this was fun. I think it was some good conversation. It was a little different than kind of what I was expecting, which is good.
Yes. That's what I strive for, man. I don't, I know I ask some cliche questions here and there, but I try to just make it more of a conversation than like an interview.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an hour, almost an hour now, and it just kind of blew by. I was having a good time. So anytime, would love to do it again in the future.
Hell yeah, man. Awesome.
Be excellent to each other. And